Good evening. My name is Janae Weimer. I'm the president of the Chicago Alumni Club in Los Angeles. Welcome and thank you very much for coming this evening. This event is very special to us. We, the club, the university, and the Alumni Board of Directors are working to enhance the support our Alumni Club provides to career development. This event, we envision, will be one of many to come. We're very privileged this evening to have such an esteemed panel join us to discuss career development and networking in their respective fields. Please join me in welcoming Merle Boulessoir, Susan Claster, Mike Dodge, and Rachel Moore. Each of them will go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to Matt to go ahead and start the moderating.
Hi, I'm Susan Claster. I am an adult hematologist. I do something totally different than everybody else. I'm on the medical staff at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and you might be wondering why an adult person is over at a children's hospital, but my expertise is taking care of adult sickle cell patients, and there are only 15 people like me in the whole country. So I guess I have some expertise in like networking in a very elite, not elite, but kind of a niche area. So that's what I do. I just moved here 3.5 years ago from the Bay Area, where I switched jobs twice in the last couple of years, so I can talk a little bit about that, if that would be helpful.
Hi, my name is Mike Dodge. I actually graduated from the college in 1993, lived in Shoreland and Breckenridge one painful year, and then in Shoreland, wonderfully. Some of the past companies I've worked for, Procter & Gamble, McKinsey & Company, General Electric, and here in Los Angeles I moved down here from San Francisco also to work for a company called Internet Brands that owns Cars Direct, and I now run a company called Atomic Online. We're a web publisher. We own and operate and publish about 60 websites. A lot of them are focused on male lifestyle, called Crave Online. So a bunch of sites on wrestling and sports and video games that guys care about, and a bunch of sites that, in theory, women care about, including parenting and pregnancy and celebrity gossip. Not that guys don't care about that too. And we sell advertising against those websites.
Hi, Rachel Morris. I'm a graduate of the Booth School of Business. I'm still getting used to saying that. My entire career I've been in corporate and investment banking. I work for Bank of America's Global Commercial and Investment Bank. I'm a client manager and basically coordinate activities and work with mainly middle market companies throughout California, primarily Southern California. So these are publicly traded and privately held companies. We work on credit facilities, treasury, and derivatives, FX, and investment banking. Happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Merle Boulessoir. I got my MBA from the University of Chicago. Notice I didn't say Booth. In 2001, I worked for a firm named Farmers Insurance, and I lead a team called Insight and Innovation. And that, in effect, is the internal analytics strategy group at Farmers. My background is in analytics and strategy. I spent a few years at Capital One before business school, worked at a firm called the Monitor Group in Boston, and have been in the insurance space for about 7 years. And I've been in LA for 4 years now.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I'm Matt Donato. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Alumni Career Services at the University of Chicago. Alumni Career Services is a relatively new venture for the university. We're really trying to build a program that provides networking resources, job opportunities, and professional development resources for all of you here. And we hope to do more of that in the future, and any input or thoughts or ideas that you have, please don't hesitate to share them with me or send them through the university's website when you can. Briefly, I've worked at the university for about 6 years in a few different roles. Before coming to Alumni Career Services, I worked in the undergraduate career office doing employer development. Before that, I had a career in banking and in consulting. So I have somewhat of a varied background, and I'm happy to also talk about networking or any other career-related issues that you might want to bring up. tonight. But the way I'd like to do the panel is I'll probably ask 2 or 3 questions and ask the panelists to chime in as they have some insights and wisdom to share with all of you. But I'd really like to make sure that we have a lot of time for you all to ask questions of the panelists, because I think you probably all have career questions, networking questions on your mind, and I really want you to be able to have the opportunity to interact with all of the really esteemed panelists we have here tonight. But first, the first question I have, I'm sure that you all get questions from alumni, from non-alumni about careers. I'm sure people want to network with you. So give me a sense of what works well when someone contacts you to have a networking conversation, or what makes you respond to someone when they reach out to you. What's an effective strategy to elicit a response from you?
Well, being in investment banking and financial services, I get an email about every other week from alumni, and I always make it a point to respond. And I think that when people are focused in, I understand when people are exploratory, but when people have some focus or some area where I can start to help them and start to make connections, because I really enjoy making connections for people. And so I think when anyone has some stated industry focuses or areas of expertise, or states even why they're trying to do what they do, I'm really happy to help. I think it's also, the world's pretty small, and by looking on Facebook or LinkedIn, they probably know someone I know or have a commonality. So I think it's always helpful to have a warm introduction or refer, I see you, worked here or went to school at this time. So drawing commonalities help. I can say in my last transition, I reached out to a lot of alumni because I was thinking about what was the optimal next step for me, and I was trying to think a little outside of the box. And I wouldn't be afraid to reach out. If someone's the CEO of a company, don't be afraid to reach out to them. I think a lot of people, I've heard some of my friends from grad school say they always reach out to the lower level people at a company. If you're interested in, let's say, McKinsey, they're reaching out to the lower level. I think the higher level people are, want to give back and maybe sometimes don't have more time, but maybe definitely have more influence and can help make more global connections for you. So I would just say don't be afraid to reach out, and I think you'll be surprised the level of response you get.
A couple of thoughts I'd share. One is that know your story pretty well. So try to be as self-aware as you can in terms of what you're looking to accomplish. Number 2 is understand a little bit more about that person that you're reaching out to, so that you have a clear idea as to what you want them to help you with. And the third thought I'm going to echo that's already been mentioned is, in this day and age, social media is just so powerful. Learn to use LinkedIn in particular is the one that I'm more familiar with. I imagine Facebook is a little less professional and more social in that sense, but learn to use LinkedIn. Figure out who's in the network or in your network and how you would like to get connected through them. What you'd find is that people are willing to help you. People are willing to make that connection, and even if you don't speak to them sometimes, they're happy to make, drop a little note and make an introduction to somebody in their network. And that's really the way in which I think the world is sort of coming together, and identifying people who've got skill sets that interest you or experience that might be relevant to you looking forward is not really that hard these days.
So I'm in academics, and I'm older than all of you guys, but nevertheless, what works in academics is word of mouth. Because, I can't tell you how many times people have gotten jobs or made connections because they just know somebody. And, and so I don't know how many of you here are interested in academics, but social networking isn't really the way things, at least from my experience, how things work. It's different in business, I think, but in academics, you have to know somebody. And so the more people, and you meet them at meetings, you meet them by doing collaborative research or something like that, but that's how people get jobs. That's how I got my job.
The only thing I'll add to that, I really strongly echo the point you made. Start at the top or start as high as you can. Don't be afraid to do that. Not enough people do that. And make sure you build that connection, know the person. On the other piece, we can probably talk more about it as we go on, is look for those opportunities for networking events. They're out there in every single field. I can tell you about some of them in the technology side, but it's not hard to do. A lot of these are open to the public, and when you meet people there, then obviously you find those connections, and nothing beats that. I think word of mouth, or what do you say, personal connection works not just in academia, but certainly in the business world as well.
I actually have one more comment. I found this position I'm currently in, I actually found online on Indeed.com, and a lot of people say internet doesn't work, but I think sometimes reaching out, as much as someone wants to help you, if they're not hiring, they're not hiring. So I think it helps to, both approach it from the search engines as well as people you know. And then what I did is I saw this listing, and I actually found it very interesting. And I knew someone in this position in Chicago, so I reached out to him. He referred me through internally, and it just works really well. So I think, everyone says use your network. You also obviously have to comb the internet and get that warm referral, as opposed to blindly applying online. Just to be one of 500 resumes online is really hard.
Thank you. Those are great answers. And I just want to add a couple. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
And that is, with respect, you mentioned reaching out for that CEO or that top-level person. And one of the things that I've come across repeatedly in job searches is, how do you get that contact information? How do you get the name, the phone number? How do you infiltrate behind the lines? Do you research websites? Do you go to meetings? What methods would you use for that?
So sorry, we didn't have the microphone. So Bill's question was, how do you get connected to the CEO level person? How do you find contact information to email or call a high-level executive? One thing I just quickly wanted to add before I let you guys address that. So you mentioned LinkedIn and Facebook as electronic tools. Another tool that you should all use in this room is the Alumni Careers Network. I strongly recommend you use the Alumni Careers Network, not least because the Alumni Career Services program runs Alumni Careers Network. But we would love to see everyone on this room, including all of our panelists, members of the network, because I think a University of Chicago focused network is a really powerful network, even in some cases more so than a LinkedIn or a Facebook, because you have a connection through your degree with all of the alumni on the Careers Network. To Susan's point, though, too, nothing really replaces the value of face-to-face contact and meeting people in person at events, specifically events here in LA. I know the club sponsors lots of events like academic lectures, happy hours. You'll see more career events on the calendar, hopefully. So please come out to events like these and other events that you hear about from the LA Club, because nothing is a substitute for the power of that personal connection face-to-face. Now, I don't know if you guys have insights about how to reach high-level people. I know we do have CEO-level people in our careers network, actually. So I think that's one way to find contact information, but other techniques or tips that you guys might have in that.
Well, I mean, on LinkedIn, you can search by company, and you can go through those pretty quickly and see, did anyone go to University of Chicago? There's a commonality, or any other school you've gone to, or just reaching out. I think having a couple, hooks always helps. But yeah, definitely the I think there's the Greater University of Chicago database. There's the MBA database is excellent, and that I've used that a lot for just reaching out on areas I'm researching, etc. Or really a lot to help maybe friends who have been laid off or unemployed. So I think, scanning those, I mean, there's lots of good search engines that you can use for LinkedIn and Facebook. I think LinkedIn is the more professional path, but if there's a company you're interested in, they went to University of Chicago, send them an invite on LinkedIn and say you'd love to connect and learn more about their business. I think another part is, don't ask for a job. Obviously, we all know you're not going to ask for a job in that email, but you say you're interested in learning more about what they do and etc. So you guys all know what to do. Yeah.
One more thought on that. Some of you have worked for direct mail companies, or we've all received direct mail, and oftentimes they probably just go directly into the trash. And the question really is, what motivates you to open one of those? So the question that I'd be asking myself is, to the extent you're reaching out somebody cold and you want this CXO person to open the email that you're sending out, ask yourself, how do you package your story, or whatever it is that you're asking them for? It might not be a job, it probably shouldn't be a job right from the get-go, but some sort of an introduction. Try to ask yourself, are you positioning yourself in a fairly compelling way and telling your story in a way that gets that person to say, you know what, I'm going to make the effort to hit that reply button or pick up the phone and call this person. That's something you really should be asking yourself.
So even in the subject line, I open the emails that say University of Chicago alumni, seeking this or asking this. So we all get so many emails every day. Use that headline as well.
Great. Another question I had, and this sort of relates, I think, to what you mentioned, Susan. I'll start with you. At a networking reception or a cocktail reception or a happy hour or something, or a professional conference, how do you take a brief opportunity to introduce yourself to someone and maybe make a connection in 5 or 10 minutes and turn that into more of a long-term professional association or at least a relationship that might help you get a job? What have you done that's been successful? Because you mentioned you had built a relationship that helped you get your most recent position here in LA.
Well, first of all, what I do, there's such a small group of us, everybody knows each other. So that's, that's one advantage of having a niche job, that everybody knows each other and it's easy to move around. I think going into a reception or someplace, you need to know the person, know something about who you're going to talk to, and connect with them so that they think that you actually know what you're talking about. That's not how I got, I've never had to do that, but I've met people, but I really think if someone came up to me and was looking, and we've actually interviewed people at these meetings, and that happens in our group a lot because we're looking, everybody's in the same meeting and you're trying to meet people, so we interview people, but you have to be prepared, and I think, just look like you know what you're doing.
I think in business community maybe a little bit more forgiving. You definitely I think you have to break through that shyness and actually walk up to people that you don't know, and be surprised how much people do enjoy talking about themselves. So you can ask a lot of questions and engage them. If you don't know them, learn about their business, ask intelligent questions. You're in this case, so get to know them so you see a fit. Think of this as just like selling any other product. You're selling yourself. So the key is you get to know them there, and then make sure you follow up the next day. You're not going to ask them for a job then. You're not even going to really kind of go too deep into that. But the next day you follow up with an email referencing the things that you talked about the night before and how there could be a fit, and you try and get that informational interview or take it from there.
Yeah, I would say follow up immediately. More than a day or two. I think it's gone. People forget. I also think just being efficient at these events. Don't be afraid to email the event organizer for a list of attendees. And usually there's, they all have to print name tags, so you're gonna name a company, name an individual, and be kind of targeted. That you go in and you're looking to talk to 3 companies and do your research before, and use your time wisely there. Don't talk, if you're focused to go there for a reason, I wouldn't use a lot of your time with people who you're just speaking with socially. Try to be as efficient as possible, because that's what everyone else there is for.
I suppose at some level you could think of it as a first-round interview. And if that's how you thought about it, you'd probably go in a little bit prepared. So to the extent that you know there was going to be somebody from Bank of America here tonight, if you had a couple of questions that you thought through that left the impression that you do actually care and that you are sort of intellectually gathered and you've actually taken the time to be thoughtful about the questions that you want to ask, that I think is a pretty powerful reflection upon you. Rather than trying to sort of sell them on what your goal is, really get them to first appreciate the skills that you have. And I think that's probably a good first step to, sort of breaking the ice and opening the door into that relationship.
And now, to make my job easier, I'm going to stop asking questions, and I'm going to let all of you ask questions of the panelists. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and I think, Jen, will you be able to bring around the wireless mic to some of the questioners? we want to capture you all for the podcast and actually video cast of this event that will be posted on our University Mind Online website, which, just as a quick editorial comment, if you visit Mind Online, you can also find either the podcast or the video cast of the 6 other events that we're podcasting or video casting this week and next week that are all career related. So you can not only be here at this event, you can also listen to the recording of the event in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C., and Boston. So I encourage you to all do that. And any questions? Anyone? Any thoughts, Bill? And just wait until Jen comes with the mic before you ask, please.
Yes, hi. Am I supposed to stand or okay? I heard some of you talking about what I believe are called elevator speeches, and perhaps having a list of talking points about ourselves. But I think that probably should also be contrasted with the informational interview, which is a very popular technique in job searches, especially for jobs that are really desirable, where you actually sit down and you're not really supposed to talk about yourself. You're supposed to just ask questions of the person. And I was wondering if I could ask the panelists to address the informational interviewing perhaps in a little more detail, because it's a very important tool for job searching. And I was wondering if we could perhaps, I don't think a lot of people really understand it.
So any insights or ways to improve your informational interviewing techniques?
I have one, actually.
Sure.
I've observed a couple friends who are in the job hunt, and I've heard them say to people, and I know none of you would do this, but I've heard them say, they've been unemployed for a little while, and they said to people, honestly, I take about anything at this point. And I cringe when I hear that, because, you want to be talking to someone who's positive and energetic and has ideas and has a goal for themselves. And I think I don't know how to help someone when they say that. I'm like, okay, well, I have no idea how to help you or where your background is. And I've heard some people say that. I mean, clearly no one's going to do that. But, I think being focused on having a very succinct and clear message of what you're looking for. And maybe you don't know exactly, you don't have to name the exact role, but what you're interested in and your background. And keep it from there and some of the areas you're interested in. And keep it kind of, I wouldn't keep it specific enough, but not too focused, so then people think, well, they would check you off for all sorts of other roles. So it's a hard balance to find, to have your story, but not be too limited. If that makes sense.
I wanted to wait to go last because I may be somewhat controversial. To me, the informational interviews, there's a little bit of a facade there. We're helping alumni when I do, but every time I do an informational interview, it's really an interview of that person. And if I like that person, if I'm impressed because they come prepared, they seem excited, enthused, I'm going to kind of drop all the pretense and say, okay, let's figure out where we can get you a job. So it moves that. So but it's not for the interviewee to drop the facade. It's it's a polite way that we get in and we get to ask questions, we get to network a little bit, but still be prepared. Exactly as Rachel said, you're selling yourself and don't think you're not, and let them then, if they're impressed, then lead into, okay, let's think about anything in my company, anything in my network of companies that are, have colleagues and friends that we could see that fits that broad yet, kind of enthusiastic, determined interest that you have.
I think that's excellent advice, and I think you do want to treat the informational interview like a job interview, so you want to be prepared. I know, I think, Willie, you mentioned doing research on the person you're meeting with, on their company. Make sure you've done that so you have sort of an educated opinion and thoughts about what they're doing. And I think, be very focused, too. One of the things that I think people lose sight of is an informational interview is your opportunity to get information. So have specific questions that you want answered about some aspect of your job search, about a specific industry or a specific company, and ask those questions. Have a list of more questions than you could ever talk about in a half-hour conversation, but make sure that you're always directing the conversation so that the person feels like you're prepared. And I think the advice that you both gave is excellent. Other questions? Yes.
So, hi. So my name is Michael. So my question is, I just started a new company about 2 months ago with 2 other partners, and being that it's a new company, we of course have absolutely no cash, and we're doing this full time right now. And the realization is hitting, as it does, amazingly enough, that we all need to find some part-time work or something to tide us over until the business becomes profitable reasonably enough. So the question is, and there's a lot of people doing this nowadays, how does one position themselves in the job market? Sort of like Jen mentioned to me, obviously there's temp agencies and things like that. But how do you position yourselves? Because they're going to ask you inevitably, why would I hire you if you'll be here for 2 months?
Yeah.
There's actually an increasing trend of folks that come out of business school or top-tier consulting firms and so on and so forth that are looking for better work-lifestyle balance. Oftentimes it could also be folks who've got children at home and they want to maybe work part-time or work on short-term projects and such. As an example, my wife, who was a classmate of mine in B school in 2001, works on a project-by-project basis for a firm that specializes in consulting in the cable industry. So you'd be surprised by how many organizations and firms there are that are actually spin-offs of the McKinseys and the Bains and the BCGs that are founded with this sole purpose. And so I think what you'd find is, if you dug deep enough, that there's actually quite a few opportunities where you do not have to explain yourself, or you do not have to hide the fact that you've got an entrepreneurial effort going on the side. It's a fairly transactional relationship in the sense that you take a 3 or 6 or 8 month project for X number of hours, and it's very well defined, and that really shouldn't be an issue.
Only thing I would add that I think it does help if you have specific skills in a specific function or specific industry that give you the ability to do that contract work. If you're going more for a general entry-level position, those are going to be a lot harder to find at that contract level. But there are sites, iFreelance and others where you can find iFreelance.com. I think there's the freelancer, but iFreelance.com for sure has lots of opportunities out there from specific term engagements as well as work from home kind of engagements.
I can work on it, actually. My husband's an entrepreneur. He started a medical device company from scratch, and he moonlighted for 4 years. So, I know that's hard, he didn't tell his employer. And a lot of times that's just what you have to do, because it was different. There was no conflict of interest. It was different enough fields, but I wouldn't preclude yourself from, maybe you're obviously an ambitious and bright person who has great industry expertise, and you know enough about something to start a company. I mean, even if you ended up working for someone for a few years, that's value additive enough for them, while it's really funding your business as your income's funding the business. So I know it's hard when you want to put all 150% of yourself into an entrepreneurial effort, but as much as your day job can fund your venture, maybe two of the partners are, and I know you've probably thought of all this, but if there's a great job in the industry that maybe will help your venture longer term, go for it, and they don't have to know about it. And not that you're concealing information, but you're looking out for yourself.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is check out the podcast of our San Francisco, Chicago, and New York events, because they were focused on entrepreneurship. And I think maybe talking to some of the people who are on those panels, I know a few of the people that started, maybe more than a few of the people that started their own businesses, and they may have some insights for you as someone who's recently started your own business.
No, just one corollary to that, as I'm thinking, as you're talking, it's interesting. One of the amazing things about technology, things like LinkedIn, is that people are The amazing things about new technology like LinkedIn is that people are always looking, quote unquote, it's like legitimate to look like you're posting your resume on there. But on the other hand, in something like this, I'm now posting that I'm started this new company. So I guess, like you're saying, just to be transparent about it, the positions I would take, it doesn't matter if they see it or not. That was the question. And sometimes people look at it like, well, you're trying to deceive me because you say this on LinkedIn, but you're presenting as...
Yeah, I guess the choice you would make is, do you curtail your LinkedIn profile in an effort to find a job,
right,
sort of take some off, or do you say, I'm just going to be honest and upfront and hope that I can find a good match with someone who will give me the time and freedom on the side when I'm not at work to run my own company? And I think conflict of interest is a big issue. So if your company is sort of in a conflict of interest with the employer that you're looking at, that may be an issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you may have to make a decision whether you want to curtail your LinkedIn profile to, maybe go for a position. Not lie.
Right, thank you.
Curtail.
Curtail.
Any other questions from the audience? Yeah, sorry, just wait for the microphone, sorry.
I'm curious to know what you feel is the value or of third parties like external recruiters to help in the job search too.
That's a good question. So the value of headhunters and external recruiters.
So first off, I think any my personal experience and phone friends I've talked to, any recruiter that asks you as the interviewee or the applicant to pay anything, forget it. Those are a waste of time and money. The rest of recruiters, I guess we call them headhunters for a reason, I think they're a bit, in my opinion, they are how you get jobs, particularly as you move up in management positions. My last 3 jobs have come through executive recruiters. Realize though that they are, they're kind of like real estate agents. They're working on this one transaction and that's what they have. Anytime one reaches out to you, even if it's not a job that you want, absolutely talk to them, get in their database so you're there, because the next time something hits you, you may be there. But don't necessarily expect that when the time's right for you, that you're looking for a job, that you can call them and they're going to have something there. It kind of works more the other way. Like I said, but it's a numbers game. The more of their databases that you can be in, absolutely be in them. Return every one of those calls, send every one of them your resume so they have it and then have an update. The other piece that they can be helpful, depending upon how good they are in the industry, is to get advice on the overall industry and also to get advice when you're considering other jobs. When you've got another job offer, ask their perspective or advice on that. They're happy to help with that. But help on getting a job when you need one, it's not so much, in my opinion.
So to echo the point, I think executive recruiters tend to be fairly opportunistic, but that certainly doesn't mean that they don't add an enormous amount of value if the timing is correct. So to the extent that you've got a Rolodex of headhunters, that's fantastic. Certainly work it aggressively. But if you don't, I'm sure that you know people who know recruiters, so start building that database of recruiters that you could reach out to. My view is that the job market is frankly starting to turn around, and not just turn around directly from the employers, but also through executive recruiters. And there are opportunities out there in quite a few functions. A couple of other thoughts that I'd like to share. One is that Matt alluded to the alumni job database for the career services. Please, of course, remember that other schools, less worthy than ours, but other schools nonetheless have their own job databases too that their alumni can access. And I'm sure that you know folks who went to Northwestern or Harvard or where have you, so please don't hesitate to reach out to them to learn what postings are there in their school alumni board, job bulletin board, particularly if you're here in LA. UCLA is an absolute minimum. And also know that to the extent that you know people who are in strategy consulting or perhaps even the investment banks, and I can speak for Capital One as well, is all of these firms have active alumni job bulletin boards as well. So I could go to Monitor's website and log in, and they'd probably be a ton of positions that, in theory, I'd be qualified for a few of them. McKinsey and Bain and BCG, as well as Capital One, and I suspect some of the iBanks as well have the same too. One last thought on this topic is there's actually a friend of mine here in LA that paid, I believe it was about $5,000 or so for a firm that specializes in getting your resume into the hands of prospective employers, even though they might not be looking. I've heard statistics that say that about 50% of the jobs are actually never posted. They're never formally listed in websites and such. And it actually worked for him. That's not to say that it wouldn't work for you. But what he did was they helped him select the firms that he wanted to reach out to, and they would blast his resume and a cover letter in, via email or via facts and such to these firms. So that can be a hit or a miss, and obviously $5,000 is a bit of an investment, but at least you've got a couple of data points of people who've tried it successfully.
Just because I was thinking about what you said, in academics, often they never post the job until they've already got somebody, and then they have to post the job so they can qualify them for the job. It's a legal requirement. So that's why word of mouth in academics is probably much better than, I think, going on a website or anything. I mean, I just think you talk to as many people as you can and find out who's looking or what their needs are, and then that, because that was my experience for the last couple of academic jobs I've had.
Just to pick up on something that Merle mentioned, career offices at different universities often do have reciprocity. So if your spouse or partner went to a different school than you did, you may be able to use that to access some of their career services. So don't overlook that. If you have a spouse, partner, or a really good friend who could help you access, UCLA or USC if you're not an alum there. Obviously, Merle, you have an MBA, I know Rachel, you do, but you have your undergrad career offices too, and some people overlook that. They may just think, oh, I should just use my business school career office, but there's lots of good career offices out there that have strong alumni networks. So I would encourage you to use any and all options at your fingertips. One quick thing I wanted to just ask you, Susan, because you're sort of the representative of academia on the panel. The academic job market is really tough right now. Universities are cutting budgets. There aren't as many teaching positions available. What do you see as an option for someone graduating with a master's or PhD even who, was planning on staying in the academy, but it's not a good time right now? What are the options? What would you maybe advise someone who sought your advice? Where should I go? What type of job should I do?
Well, I've only been in the medical academic field, so I can't, so that's, the thing about medical academics is you can always go work. In an emergency room, you can work in a clinic. I mean, it's sort of, I can't really answer that question, but I mean, you could always teach in a community college. I mean, there's other jobs. I mean, we have jobs. Children's Hospital has jobs. We're about to hire another hematologist. So, there's money. But you're right. And for example, so I can give you one example. My daughter's graduating from Whittier College, and she's going to take the GREs. And every time she goes to a class, everybody's older than her, and they're all going back to grad school. So people are going back, who can't find jobs, are going back to grad school to get masters or whatever, because it's a really bad time to be in the job market. That's sort of the flip side of what you're asking me. I think there are jobs out there. Although, we've actually cut back on staff, but we're not cutting back on faculty. So go get an MD. You always get a job. That's all I can say.
Really get something to add?
I apologize if this is a little bit off topic, but nobody's asked me questions about resumes.
Oh, yeah.
And I suspect there's probably one coming, so maybe I'm preempting this. But I had an executive coach that I worked with for a few months earlier this year and got what I thought was pretty sage counsel on resume writing. One of the things she suggested to me was, look, people tend to think of resumes in terms of writing out their history for the last N number of years. And really what it is designed to do is it's designed to tell your story in terms of the skill sets that you've acquired. So don't think of your resume as a document that details pretty much everything that you've done in every job that you've had, or necessarily every extracurricular activity that you've been involved in. Think of it as your cell document. Typically these days, if you're applying for a position, there's probably 100 other resumes that recruiter is seeing. So the question is, how do you tell your story in a succinct yet complete way that helps you stand out, not only for the content, but also the clarity of communication? What do I mean by that? Oftentimes we see in resumes that people talk about how they're team players, or they're highly energetic, and they're motivated, and all of those wonderful qualities we can all admire. But the fact of the matter is that the resume is not an opportunity for you to use adjectives to describe yourself. It's your opportunity to very meticulously and objectively lay out what you've accomplished and what the outcome of that was. Your effort, what was the context, what was your contribution, what was the outcome. What you really want then is you want the reader to walk away with some adjectives. if you feed them, those are fairly vacuous, right? It doesn't mean much for me to say that I'm a good communicator, I'm a team player. You really want the resume reader to walk away with that. So be thinking about how you tell your story. The person's reading 100 resumes, and you'd be doing yourself and the recruiter a huge favor by really being very crisp in telling your story. Sorry, that was a little bit off topic, but...
In academics, the resume is really important. You have to show what, I mean, and you don't really have to sell yourself, you just have to show what you've done. But I can tell you we've done a lot of looking at different people for different jobs, and if the resume, I mean, if the resume doesn't kind of match the person, there's big red flags. Maybe sometimes they sound too good and they aren't that good, or they don't do it, or they don't have the publication or the experience, but you have to really have a good resume to get a good academic job.
Other questions?
Hi. Well, I think the scariest thing I have with people who are asking me for jobs and also in negotiating is salary. And how do you get, in this climate, how do you ask somebody's... there was a situation that a friend of mine had where they went for a job interview and they got it. They got all the way up to the top, and then they said, we're going to give you X. And it was like $20,000 or $30,000 less than they were making before. So I wanted to know whether you had any suggestions, and all the panelists can do about talking about salaries, because I'm scared of it, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Salary negotiation is a big topic. You want to tackle it?
Right, collect all my thoughts. We first and foremost realize once you have the job offer, they're not going to renege the offer because you asked for more money. So it never hurts to ask for more money. What does help is to give a reason why. And so, like you offered me, X, I need X plus Y because that's how much I made in my last job, because I have, certain level of expenses, whatever, that sort of thing. Give some sort of valuable reason, but realize all they can do is say no. Most of the time they meet you some part way there, and try to do something. And that is, I think about the ones that we do, we kind of factor in that someone's going to negotiate a little bit, so we build some of that in, and we expect them to. Even those ones that are really tough and negotiate several times back and forth, once they're hired, they gave their 2 weeks, month notice somewhere else. By the time they start, we've forgotten all about that, and it's really about just being excited to have them on board. The other piece I would add to that is when you are doing that negotiation, give the reason why, and then also re-emphasize why you're so excited to get to come and join. So you're saying why you want this job, but why you need a little bit more money, and just ask. The other thing, decision of whether or not to take a job because the salary's not there. A couple of things. Obviously, it's the major things. If you're moving into a new field, a new industry, you might have to take a little bit of a step back. You have to decide if that's worth your longer-term career pathing, and if it's worth that. The economy's been a little sluggish. It's exactly as I said, it is starting to pick up a little bit. So hopefully we're getting through the darker pieces of that. The other piece is if you can't get it all right away or immediately, the other option you can also say, hey, can we set some goals? Put something in place for 6 months or a year out. But I would try and get that into your offer letter as well.
Well, I think another thing that's important is find out what everybody else is getting. Because I've had a couple of job interviews where, you need to, for example, I worked at San Francisco General, University of California, San Francisco, and there was no question what you were going to get because it was set. It was a university job, and you just fit into some niche, and that was what you got, and there was no discussion, which made it really easy. You didn't have to worry about it. The job I'm at now, the initial amount of money they wanted to offer me was for a person who just was out of fellowship, and that was just not going to happen because I'm way out of fellowship. And so, they fixed that, but then when I went to interview, I said, is this negotiable? And the head of the division said no. So once what they fixed it to was fine, but, then I wanted to, if they tell you it's not negotiable, that's it. Because it's not a business, it's academic. So sometimes they just only have a fixed amount of money.
couple of thoughts. First is think about why you're considering accepting the role to begin with. So salary is obviously one part of the equation, but really ask yourself, it's the starting point perhaps. So where do you believe it'll lead to? So sometimes, to Mike's point, you might have to take a little bit of a side step or a back step in order to move forward, because there might be other dimensions to this offer other than salary. It could be bonuses, it could be even non-financial. So the second thought is that think of it as a negotiation, right? And in a negotiation, both parties want to walk away feeling pretty good about themselves. So if you can figure out what it is that they're flexible on, the prospective employer, it might not be base salary. It could be a signing bonus. It could be your vacation time. Or it could be some other dimensions of that negotiation that they might be willing to give more on, but they might be constrained on this base salary part of it. So try and feel that out and try to create an opportunity where perhaps you get an extra week or two of vacation for the same salary level, and that's something that they might be willing to give. But and they feel like they've won from that negotiation, as do you. So figure out all the different parameters and work through what will be a win for you and for the employer as well.
Yeah, I would just, the one last point, I would say don't be afraid to make sure they know you have multiple options and offers. You're more where they're competing for you, and they know their pencil has to be sharp. You're going to get a better offer that way. And be open. I'm receiving my final offer from this group. You're evaluating 3 offers, and they're very interested in it, but you want to make sure that the entire package is competitive. I think they usually get there because they know exactly what market is.
Go ahead, because you're
Sorry. And by the way, after you start, you're going to realize that there was probably more that they were willing to give. So don't kick yourself. That's just a fact of life. On the flip side, there's probably less that you were willing to accept. So just remember that.
And you just want to really emphasize your best negotiation is before you start. Once you're there, you don't have that. Agree though that some of the bigger companies, a McKinsey, a Procter & Gamble, those are probably set and you're not going to negotiate. For the vast majority of mid-sized companies, it is a little tough. We struggle all the time with what is that right salary range, so you may have some negotiation there. And the other piece is, but nothing gets me, to go to a higher salary more than competition. They've got another offer from somebody else. Do they really? Do we think they do? Oh, damn. We got to meet that one. So
They could be making that up.
sure. But don't bluff too much.
Just in case any of you are considering academics, I think that you get higher salaries at private institutions than you do at public institutions, especially University of California at this moment in time.
The one thing I would say though too is know what you need, because I think not to say that you can't get competing offers, but that's a lot tougher now than it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. You may just have been interviewing for 6 months or for a year, and you finally break through and get that offer, and then it's 20%, 40%, 50% lower than you thought. Can you live off of that? I mean, is it something where, okay, I really need this job, is it realistic that I take this job and then I stay on the market? I mean, I think that's a big consideration for people right now. Hopefully you can have a competing offer. Hopefully you can have a couple people bidding for your services. But if not, I think you need to really be realistic and ask a personal question: is this something that I can afford to do? At least for the short term, before I could either raise my salary. And I think the technique of saying, negotiating and saying, can we revisit this in 6 months, getting that written into your offer if possible is a good thing. Or if it is something where you're making a minimum amount just to cover your expenses, you might need to stay on the job market a little bit, even though you've taken a job. You may need to keep looking to make sure that you're not getting yourself in a long-term position where you're just covering your expenses, you're never able to save, and you're sort of, in some ways, digging a deeper hole. So I think, we can certainly talk more about this in the networking session, or if people have questions now, we can certainly delve into it.
I thought maybe I should, I don't know what side you're talking to. I thought maybe I should pose a question and a statement. I think there might be some differences in the nonprofit world right now about salary and any wiggle room for negotiation I don't see at my agency that if there's any spot open, that there's any room for negotiation. People are lucky to get the positions. But I think by the same token, in the corporate world or nonprofit, we have to ask ourselves, or our friends who are looking, or our adult sons and daughters, or on whose ever behalf we're thinking and listening tonight, how long is this position scheduled to be funded for? Is there money in some of Susan's line of work? Stuff has NIH grants. Is there another one coming up? Can I work and be a research assistant on the next one too? Or does it feel like a long-term job and it's really not? Or in the case of my industry, one of my locations of my agency is laying off 5 teacher aides whose last day is going to be next Friday. Well, we're going to get Head Start money starting in January. Maybe they'll be rehired. But it was the last people hired that got laid off. And FYI, it also happened to be that performance was factored in. It wasn't exactly the last 5 people hired. It was kind of the last 5 people hired, and they factored in. I'm not sure there are any answers to any of this. I guess I should tell you that I got a job, a position change, an upgrade with no increase in salary. And I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying.
So I want to comment about the grant situation. So, you know, one thing that's really positive is that Obama put all this money into the NIH for the American Recovery Investment and Recovery Act. And, gee, I think USC has gotten a ton of money for that. Now, those are 2-year grants. But we got millions of dollars just in the School of Medicine to fund those grants. And my impression is that we're going that actually is a good place to be a research and have a research position, because there's lots of money being poured into the NIH. But I think you're right. You have to ask how long the position is. How long is it's so-called soft money? How long is the position going to be there? You know, what's going to happen if that doesn't go anywhere? But we have people who come in and get what are called CRCs, so clinical research coordinator positions. A lot of research going on. Those people turn over fairly quickly because some of them go on to grad school, but once one of their projects either finishes or the money, whatever happens, they go on to another project. So if you're good at that, you can get on another project. But I think actually research, biomedical research right now looks to me from where I sit, a good place to be. But you have to be careful because, you know, you might not be there in 2 years. You have to kind of remember that. And on the funding, and you don't get paid very well, I have to tell you. You don't, I mean, it's not like you're going to make 6 figures, you know, doing research coordination for one of my grants if I had one, but it's interesting, and there's probably a lot of them.
I think another use of networking, and we touched on this a little bit before, but networking to find out salary information too. I mean, I think if you can, you know, network your way into an opportunity, if you're fortunate enough to get an offer through the interview process, network with alumni or other people who can give you some inside information about salary or the likelihood of funding continuing, because that's really important information to have as you're making a decision. And then the second thing, if you do sort of have a position that's temporary and you get laid off, but then there's another round of funding that you know about coming in 2 or 3 months, make sure that you're networking back with the people who you work with. Don't take it personally that you got laid off. I mean, I know there may have been, you mentioned some performance issues that led to people getting laid off, but make sure that, you know, you're not burning your bridges and saying, oh, this organization stinks. Make sure you keep in touch with the people, because when they do have the funding, you're an easy hire for them. They know you, hopefully they know you in a good way, and they might want you back because you don't require much training, you know the systems, you know the people, and you can hit the ground running on day one, so you're actually a potentially more valuable commodity to them. And, you know, in the interim, I know unemployment was just extended again yesterday by the federal government. Don't discount that option if you're in a transition. Unemployment money is really, really important. It's there for you for a reason, and it can help you weather, you know, it seems like an increasing number of months every time. In the back.
Yeah,
question. Just wait for the mic, please.
Cool. This could be to anybody, even you. Hey, how do temp assignments look on your resume? Let's say you've gone a year or so and you've temped, I don't know, 5 or 6 months out of that year, and it's been 3 months at one company and 3 months at another company.
That's a great question. So temp assignments, how do they look on your resume? And And or how do you put them on your resume? What looks good? And Susan, do you want to start?
No, because I have nothing to say. I have
For me, I think any kind of high turnover, short time in a job is always a little bit of a red flag. I think, but it's still, and I would say even in the temp world, I would think 2 or 3 would be kind of the max that you'd want to be able to expose. Ideally, no more than 2 temp jobs. Because when I'm there, one of the questions I'll ask when I'm interviewing is, okay, why didn't this temp become a full-time hire? And there can be valid reasons, obviously for those. It was very finite, it was a defined term, it had short-term funding, all those sort of things. That's why it was a temp job. Realize a lot of temp jobs do lead to permanent jobs, and there's some expectation of that. So you want to be a little careful of highlighting too much on there. Sometimes, and it's gotten past me too, people just highlight it as a job. They don't even highlight it as a temp job. And I think you have to determine how involved you were in that job and how that'll kind of get back. But if you're there long enough and had relevant roles, sometimes it may not even be necessary to talk about the temp agency part of it.
One way to position it might be to call yourself an independent contractor. Sometimes what some folks do...
Excuse me, I purposely asked that question because there's no intent to be an independent contractor here. I'm just saying this is a temp job to pay bills. It paid, like $30 an hour, so it really worked out. And
so that would be a tough one. It's sort of the question that I would ask off the cuff is it helping you tell your story a little bit more? And if it is, I think that's just perfectly fine. If it is completely tangential to the professional development story that you want to tell, then I frankly am a little bit at loss for words on your thoughts of whether you should put it on there or not.
Well, I listed just I need to explain a chronological story. So it's what did you do from this time to that time?
Or call it, if it's focused in an area, call it financial project work and list what you did. And then the firms you work for, you can leave out who the temp agency was. You were getting certain type of project. Call it project work.
I would too. I wouldn't discount the independent contractor tack on that, or say you were independent consultant or something of that sort. And certainly in this year, this economy, you give a little bit more leeway on those kind of things. But I would say focus on the previous job that you had if it fits more in line with what you're trying to do, and really focus on that and say, hey, in the interim, while I've been looking for something interesting, this did paying the bills, and then, like I said, go back to the good story that's on your resume.
Yeah, I think, bottom line, and I think you were saying this, Susan, if it really was you were photocopying for 3 months and you made $30 an hour, which was great rate for photocopying, then just leave it off. I think it would be better to have a gap, if it's not at all relevant to your professional story at all and it doesn't tell anything relevant, then just,
Hey, Matt, my real rate's actually 25 to 35. Oh, I just gave you the average.
It's a little richer. I know John. He was a college classmate of mine. I think we have time for one more question from the audience if someone wants to sort of close us here. Yeah.
I have a number of friends who started out in academics who left academics because, not current, well, some of them currently, but because the grant funding was running out or it just didn't look good. And I think the message I want to give you is you have to kind of think about how could you go back to school or do something different that would be short-term and give you another opportunity. So one of my friends became a teacher. He was doing biomedical genetic research, and he went to a private school where he didn't really have to get a teaching credential. He subsequently did get a teaching credential, but that's something you can do with your background where I think it'd be really fun, and you don't get great pay, but if you can't find a job doing research or you don't want to be there anymore, you can think outside the box. Somebody else I know ended up leaving research kind of because the funding was running out and becoming a patent lawyer. And he's making tons of money and working like a dog. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad. But I think the point is, and then somebody else I know got laid off by a biotech company up in the Bay Area and is currently going to San Francisco State to get a CRC certification. So she can be a clinical researcher, even though she's not required in the new job she got to do that. But it just positions her and it's a short-term thing, I think it's 6 months, or maybe even a year, where if that startup doesn't work, then she's got the credentials to go work for like Novartis or Genentech or somebody, and she's got those credentials. So sometimes you have to go back to school, and not necessarily at the University of Chicago.
One last time.
And then we'll get chased away. So we've spent a fair bit of the last hour and change talking about jobs. What I counsel the audience is, remember that it's really your career we're talking about. The job is really a way to ultimately connect together and string together a career. So as you look for new opportunities, try to make that mindset shift from saying this is a job to this is my career, and you'll find yourself making decisions that are better for you in the long term and are much more foundational for the future than if you think of it merely as a job.